equity, diversity, inclusion, little stories, real lives. This is REDI.
Welcome everyone to the REDI Podcast. I'm your host, Azam Aziz.
And I'm your co-host, Tanisha Dalip.
Why we're here? Why are we here? Out of all the things that we decided to do, why a podcast?
Well, we decided to do this podcast to have real conversation, real engagement with persons with disabilities because we realized that there is a gap and it really needs to be filled, and persons with disabilities need a voice.
Interesting that you would say a gap. REDI is actually an acronym for rights, equity, diversity, and inclusion. We're here at NCPD, National Center for Persons with Disabilities. That's the hosting ground for the REDI Podcast. And when it is that I discovered NCPD, number one, there was that statement that NCPD was always Trinidad and Tobago's best kept secret. Unfortunately, I think when we look at the culture in Trinidad, but the culture in, I would say, mass media, social media, etc., I think persons with disabilities often become the best kept secret when it comes to groups, institutions, and organizations.
They become invisible, basically.
I think that's it right there. And the purpose behind the REDI Podcast is to, I would say, bring what was hidden to the forefront, and to give persons an opportunity to share with us their real life stories. You know that we have a sequence of guests that are coming. We have persons with disabilities who have done exceptionally well for themselves, but we also have healthcare professionals. We have possibly some specially invited guests that can give us insight into policies as to how we could create a better future for persons with disabilities in Trinidad and Tobago. So, Tanisha, I think what we could start by doing is give them some facts, some hard facts on this topic of persons with disabilities, possibly some statistics that we could go off on. Go ahead.
Okay, so basically, according to the Trinidad and Tobago Central Statistics Office in 2011, there is approximately 50,000 persons in Trinidad and Tobago living with disabilities. Now, that figure have pretty much increased by now, and I would say maybe it's about 140 to 150,000 persons with disabilities. So that's a very large gap of our population. So I think that, bringing about the REDI campaign, rights, equity, diversity, inclusion, is important to ensure that persons are represented. And let's start with what REDI means, right? So rights.
Well, as you mentioned rights, I want to piggyback a little further. You said 2011. We're in 2026. Why is it that for 15 years there is no data on this marginalized group?
Well, I believe, or I've read also, that the persons are sometimes ashamed to come forward. There is not a lot of options for testing or, being diagnosed. And yeah, so it's very touchy with the amount of persons we are not actually sure. And then there are varying types of disabilities. So it would have disabilities that one can see, and then it would have like learning disabilities and disabilities you wouldn't typically know a person has unless they are diagnosed.
Well, if we are touching on these abbreviations, rights, we can only talk about rights because In most instances, we often, and by we, meaning I would say the general public, oftentimes overlook the rights to persons with disabilities and how we may even infringe on those rights and not even know it. I think, well, at the center here, we do a disability sensitization training that will help, I would say, the general public, the workforce, to be pretty much aware about social cues, do's and don'ts, the things to be aware of. Because when I came at the center, I'm being real, I didn't know that you could look like anyone else and have a disability. And sometimes I think in the interaction with persons who we're unaware of, sometimes we can make a bias judgment call without knowledge that this individual that you interacted with just might have a disability.
And it's also vice versa as well. You might look at someone in a wheelchair and think that they are not intellectually capable of communicating with you.
That is so true. That is so true. So,
And there are laws as well, as we are on the topic of rights. So there's the Equal Opportunity Act right now. And even though there are laws and policies in place, these things are not really being enforced. So we have to advocate for and ensure that persons, with disabilities are included in these conversations.
why is that though? Why do you think that that's the case? Why is it that there seems to be the policies, a lot of people, but where is the infrastructure in place for that? Why do you think a lot of companies, organizations don't necessarily have or have not allocated resources to facilitate persons with disabilities to that degree?
Because they probably don't see them as persons that can contribute meaningfully to the company or to the to the nation, and that needs to change. Because not because a person has a disability means that they can contribute and be functioning citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
But isn't that kind of an oxymoron in some instances? I mean, if you just turn on the radio station, and you might hear the song "Isn't She Lovely," Stevie Wonder. He's blind. He's blind. So we have instances, and look, X-Men, talking about Professor Xavier. He is in a wheelchair. But so in one instance, why is it that we would look at the extremes and look at the entertainment industry and different persons across the board, Stephen Hawkins? There have been many contributions by persons with disabilities that are quite noble and that we celebrate today. So why is it then this is not being translated into a daily culture?
Well, in Trinidad, I believe it's because lack of awareness, lack of, people coming together to raise this as an actual issue. So there's not enough representation from persons with disabilities in Trinidad. And, like we would say, like we are quote unquote normal, regular persons, but and
Persons without disabilities.
persons without disabilities.
Right.
And we would actually see, we have our representation. We would see persons without disabilities making headlines, doing amazing things. But where is the representation for persons with disabilities? Then that is what needs to change as well. It comes back to equity as well, right? So equity is not the same as equality.
Okay, explain.
So equality is providing the same resources for everybody, right? Equity is providing resources or, catering to the needs specific to an individual. So therefore, an example, right? If it is we were having an exam, you would get an hour. However, the persons with a disability should receive an accommodation so they can get an extra 15 minutes, an extra 20 minutes, or if they have like a motor disability, they can use the pencil grips or things like that. So that
Fairness then.
fairness, yes.
Fairness.
It really is fairness. Equity is fairness.
Now, when we talk about fairness and we go down by the grocery or in the mall, there's no park in the mall except that blue park. Why then do we see a lot of people who don't have a wheelchair? Or I'm not saying that that is for persons alone with wheelchairs, but why is it then on the aspect of fairness? The things that the limited things and spaces that have been, I would say made accessible. Why is it that we tend to rush? Well, now when I say we, I'm not lumping myself in that. I don't rush for that. But why is it that generally I when I go to the mall, when I go to the grocery, I see some persons parking in a spot that they seem as convenient to them, but it's an inconvenience when someone who has a disability, who has walking challenges, can come and get their spot. So I think when we're talking about fairness, there's that statement where it's a dog-eat-dog world. I think sometimes we need to remember that how we wrestle against one another here should not be in the same way, on the same degree to which you engage someone who may have mobility challenges. And I think we need to fairly treat others from a consideration point of view. First and foremost, I think that's the best way for us to start. What it is that you can do. You may not have the resources to provide a place or a space physically, but you could provide a mental and emotional space for someone to be considered, treated fairly. Now, diversity. Let me ask this question. And I think this question is going to be pretty much a controversial question in reverse. But I think it's a question that some persons might be asking in a prejudicial way. But at least let's just ask it. Should a workforce include someone with a disability? Should a workforce include someone with a disability? Because I mean, do you know what diversity?
Yes, of course, because persons with disabilities shouldn't be taught as an afterthought. They should be included, and they would bring their own special set of skills, and that, yes, they should be included.
What then do we do to help the culture that is right now what it is being taught in schools, primary schools, secondary schools, and just the mass culture? What then can we teach? What can we tell individuals or bring to the forefront for them to see that, hey, someone who has a disability does not mean that the standard or the quality of the working environment has diminished because someone with a disability has come aboard? What do you think we could possibly be?
We could raise awareness and, let people know there are different types of disabilities, different things that people can contribute, persons with disabilities can contribute, and we can ensure that there is safe access and egress to buildings, and there's a lot that we can teach.
So I think it's a sensitive point of consideration. And why is it sensitive? Because I think it bleeds into when we're dealing with equality, equity, fairness, and diversity in all spheres. I think history has shown that when we make a prejudicial judgment call on a particular individual, class, or race, gender, any kind of discrimination, that I think it fosters an environment that is not fair,
Not inclusive.
not inclusive,
Yeah.
right? And when we're dealing with the inclusive aspect of persons with disabilities, how do we include someone who has been invisible?
We need to make sure that they feel valued and seen, that they are part of the conversation. Like they weren't just invited into the room. They were actually, their opinions and thoughts and things matter. So yeah, making them a part of the actual conversation, not just having them in the room.
Do you think that people are generally selfish when they think about the interactions? Because when I'm thinking about what makes, because it's, they don't they don't become automatically invisible. They Anyone who becomes invisible is because those who are around them are choosing not to see them, choosing not to engage with them. So do you think that there is a selfish culture that we need to, I would say, expose?
Yeah, that because that goes back to like long time days where persons with disabilities were actually locked away
Wow.
and they were like kept hidden from the world because they weren't seen as normal. They weren't seen as persons. They weren't even seen as people. Like they didn't have an identity. So they were just kept away and all their abilities and gifts were stifled. So that is why the awareness is necessary today.
So guys, I think this is a good start. The REDI Podcast. 2026 is gonna be a year where we're gonna have, I would say, some real stories. Um, it's gonna be candid. A lot of the questions gonna really bring things to the forefront. So here's what we're gonna do, because um, this is something brand new that we're doing. This is our pilot episode, what we will call it. But I think a challenge that we can do for every guest that comes on uh, is to ask a question that they'll want to leave for the following guest. So, seeing that you are essentially our very first guest because you have been invited into our space here in the REDI Podcast, leave a comment. Leave a comment down in the comment section about a question or an idea that you may like to see featured or for us to ask our next upcoming guest. Okay? So this is good? It's good. Welcome everyone to the REDI Podcast. I am your host, Azam Aziz.
And I am Tanisha Dalip.
This is
Take care.
This is